I've got a running joke with my colleague back in Michigan, Topher Drives, about what do we call ourselves? Those of us who drive cars and other motorized vehicles on YouTube and tell you all about them. Are we journalists? Are we YouTubers? Are we content creators? What is that job title? I am fortunate enough to get to do things like this on a Monday afternoon and tell you all about the Mazda MX-5 Miata. But does that make me a journalist in the same way that somebody who went to school for journalism and is out reporting the news, for example, are we one and the same? I would say there could be a debate about whether people who put a GoPro on their face and talk about how a car drives and post that video on the internet are considered to be journalists. But what I will say is that I align with many of the more standard professional automotive journalists in my desire and pursuit for automobiles that embrace a level of simplicity. And I want to talk today about why automotive journalists tend to flock to and sing the praises of the Mazda Miata for the last, it's been out for over 30 years at this point. And what they're right about, and what I will fully admit that I and many other journalists are wrong about the Miata. If you're watching this video, you've probably got a good idea about what the MX-5 Miata is. This is the fourth generation of the car, and it's stuck to its roots ever since it launched in technically 1989 for the 1990 model year. It is a front-engined, rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated for most of the Miata's lifetime, two-seater sports car. This one you're looking at is a Grand Touring model with a soft top coming in at what I think is still a fairly reasonable $36,000. It's got 181 horsepower out of this naturally aspirated inline-4 engine, and this one has the 6-speed manual, although there is an automatic available. The fourth generation of the Miata has been out for a number of years now, this one being the third iteration of the fourth generation. It sees a few subtle improvements to the driving and livability of the car. We've got an updated limited slip differential, an updated steering system, and for those of you who enjoy your infotainments, this one has a much updated screen that features touchscreen compatibility for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So in essence, it is an car. It is the most pure definition of a sports car. Some people like to say, oh, the Miata's not a sports car. It is. It is one of the most pure examples of it. And this isn't going to be any full breakdown on the Miata because the Miata's been out for so long, even in this third generation version. So I'm not going to tell you every little nitty-gritty detail about the car. We're going to talk about, like I said, what automotive journalists get right, why they like this car, and where some of their blind spots are with it as well. So here's a perfect example, just getting started here. I'd love to do this drive with the top down, as I have been for most of my time with the Miata, but you all would have trouble hearing me then. It's not going to sound as good for you. So let's put the top up. And you reach back and you realize soft top still features a manually operated top. Now, in today's day and age of ease, comfort, and automation, that might seem abhorrent to the standard car shopper. The idea of putting the top up manually when so many other vehicles will do it for you. However, the automotive journalist is going to find pleasure in the simplicity and the quickness of being able to simply reach behind you and get that top up much quicker than any sort of powered mechanism would be able to do. They're also going to find a happiness and a solitude in knowing that if one were to purchase this vehicle, this manual mechanism has a very, very slim chance of having anything go wrong with it over many, many years, well past the warranty of this Miata, whereas something with a powered top is going to have that possibility of having something go wrong. And then the driving purist in many automotive journalists is going to appreciate the fact that by not having a powered mechanism for this top, we're saving weight and keeping the center of gravity lower of the vehicle. Right there, we start to see that difference in, okay, the standard shopper might want something that's going to make their lives easier and seem more luxurious and like they're getting more for their new car purchase. But as people who spend their day in and day out time thinking about and studying and experiencing everything that this new car market has to offer us, there becomes a refreshment in the anti-new, the anti-advanced, the status quo, and not making things more complex and more new just for the sake of newness. Next, as I pull out onto this road here, it's a pretty fast road. I'm making a left turn. I see some traffic coming. I'm going to have to get my shift right here. I'm not going to want to stall it. This is a very old school manual transmission. There's not going to be anything helping me from taking off here other than me balancing my left foot and my right foot properly. Give it a little rev. Release the clutch. Off we go. Again, your maybe average new car buyer right now doesn't want a vehicle that they're going to have to do something right in order to prevent a bad situation right there. Had I stalled the vehicle, had I taken off too strong, probably not much was going to happen. I was probably going to have to maybe pull to the side of the road. I mean, me knowing how to drive a manual, I would know to push the clutch in, start the vehicle back up, and continue on. But someone who weren't as familiar with driving a manual car, they might see that as a situation in which to panic and possibly be stuck in the middle of the road if they didn't know how to quickly restart the vehicle and continue on their way. So somebody less comfortable with driving and someone who wants their utility vehicle in front of them and surrounding them to simply get them from point A to point B, they don't want anything to do with the manual transmission. They want the car to work easier and simpler for them. But those of us who regularly drive vehicles that are constantly trying to separate us from the driving experience, we take a joy in actually getting to interact with your vehicle and for there being a degree of consequence if you don't interact with your vehicle properly. That's why you might see people who have manual cars talk about there being this interaction with the vehicle, because it's in some ways as if you didn't provide something to your child, or if you failed to feed your pet. If you do something wrong, this vehicle and its well-being is relying on me as the driver to treat it properly. And if I don't give it the care that it needs, it's not going to act properly. And the result is not going to be good for either the machine or for me, the driver. So there's a trust element here. The vehicle's trusting that as I come to the stop sign, if I come to a full stop, I'm going to need first gear, and then I'm going to release that clutch smoothly and then push it back in order to shift down into second. There's an ever-increasing mindset in our Western society that happiness is carefreeness. It's the ability to simply do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's a degree of nihilism, really, in that the world, my world, should be perfectly catered toward me. And what a lot of people fail to realize is we as human beings find purpose and find a deep contentment in being relied upon. They'll often say that if somebody's suffering from deep depression, something as simple as buying a fish can help keep them right there. That's probably not a turn I should make. Buying a fish can help keep them from acting on suicidal thoughts, because there's just that basic core simple knowledge that, okay, if I kill myself, then I probably shouldn't talk about that. If I'm not here tomorrow in order to feed this fish will no longer live. This fish relies on me for its well-being. And that simple notion right there is enough for many people to motivate them to continue living and to give them some degree of contentment. And that might be a crazy stretch for justification of the manual transmission, but I don't think it's enough to simply say, oh, I like feeling the mechanical simplicity of the car, because there's plenty of reasons why manual transmissions are not ideal. They're not as quick around the racetrack. They're not as easy to drive in traffic. But I think it goes as deep as to say the connection here of me knowing that, all right, downshifting into third and then second right there, the car relied upon me to do it properly. And then there's the satisfaction of getting it right. It's that if I don't get this shift right, the car is going to jerk and not sound good and not give me the performance metric I'm looking for here. But when I do get it right, there is a harmony and there's a satisfaction. There's a little pat on the back for myself, knowing that I did the shift properly. Now, most cars, when they see some sort of mid-cycle refresh, are improving styling, or they're spending time and money on fixing interior bits, or maybe updating technology that has since progressed since the vehicle was launched a few years prior. And we are seeing a little bit of that here for this ND3 version of the Miata. But the biggest talked about updates for this car were the updates to its steering and the updates to its limited slip differential in the rear. Not many other vehicles are getting development effort and time into the driving experience in that way. And again, journalists are going to be quicker to report on how the steering feels different in the Miata than the fact that it has a much updated and much sharper and nicer to use infotainment system. Heck, the car even sees some updated styling outside, but I doubt you would notice it without looking directly from an ND2 to an ND3 Miata, and I even forgot to mention it in the intro of the video. As journalists, we experience model after model that used to stand for a good driving experience, such as a BMW M3, be ruined, virtually ruined, by numb steering and disconnected driving dynamics. So when a car actually takes effort, so when a manufacturer actually puts effort into improving that driving experience and improving the steering feel and the driving dynamics of a vehicle, that gets our attention. And we want others to care about it because we care about it. But realistically, for most people shopping for a vehicle, most people that don't drive cars for a living, they are going to care more about the infotainment updates in the vehicle and the livability aspects and making it look and work relevantly than the fact that it drives, probably imperceptibly better than the previous Miata. None of us here were talking about how disconnected the ND1 and ND2 Miatas were. So the updates are certainly subtle. I gotta say, it does still feel really, really good. But is your average automotive shopper gonna notice it? Unlikely. Even in this Grand Touring model of the Miata, which is the most luxurious version, top of the line, it's still loud in here. This is a soft top that isn't full of a bunch of sound deadening. You hear cars go by you on the highway. You hear road and wind noise even cruising up here at 60 miles per hour. Now, to your average car shopper and consumer, hey, another Miata right there. To your average car shopper, that's going to be a demerit toward the Miata. They're going to flock to something that isn't going to be loud on the highway and isn't going to make it difficult to talk to their passenger when cruising at highway speeds, and they're going to be able to listen to music with more fidelity. But to the automotive journalist, he or she understands that that noise means that Mazda didn't put a bunch of extra sound deadening and therefore weight into a part of the car that would not only add weight to the vehicle, but also, again, ruin the center of gravity and raise it up. So we appreciate that noise and that simplicity there because realistically, we do get to spend plenty of time in vehicles that have way too much sound deadening and are very, very peaceful to drive in all sorts of driving situations. So this is almost a little bit of a fresh reprieve to us from those insulated boxes. And you can put up with it for a week. But for somebody who's actually buying this car as a usable daily driver to use every day, I don't know if they're going to want that. For the ND2 Miata, they added power by raising the red line. I know they did other things to the engine, but most importantly, they made it so the engine could rev out higher and therefore make more peak horsepower. Now, most people realistically want power down low. They don't want to have to rev their engines all the way out and be forced to wait for usable power to come online up tucked away near the high end of the rev line. red line. That's why we see turbocharged vehicles that make tons of torque and power down low, and then obviously electric vehicles that have virtually all of their power from a stop. But the automotive journalist who spends time in all vehicles that have more than enough power these days, I mean, we have family haulers and pickup trucks that can do 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. We are not lacking power in our day-to-day vehicles anymore. So when we get in a car like the Miata, it's refreshing to us to, ooh, I actually have to work for this power a little bit, and I gotta rev it up, and I gotta wait, and I can hear the engine sing out, and then barely feel more pull at the top of the rev range. It's something that is, again, a novelty to us, but if you've spent most of your life driving a naturally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder in your day-to-day commuter car, and 150 or 160 horsepower is the norm to you, you're not going to find 180 horsepower exciting in this vehicle, regardless of the power-to-weight ratio. I get my speed fix by other vehicles. I mean, I've got a McLaren 750S coming in later this week, but because of that, that is why when I get into a Miata, I am appreciating the other aspects of the driving experience and taking that in with fresh perspective. But realistically, if you're somebody looking to buy maybe your first sports car or a midlife vehicle, yeah, you're probably going to want something that's going to thrill you more when you put your right foot down on the accelerator pedal, rather than make you work for it the way you have to with a Miata. If you look around the interior of the manual Miata, you'll find no sport button. And that is because there are no drive modes in the Miata. Your drive mode is how are you driving? What gear are you in? If you want to go sporty, you better be down in second. And there's your sport mode right there. Now, your average car shopper probably going to want a sport mode. They're going to think, okay, I want a vehicle that can drive chill, and then when I put it in sport mode, it feels peppier because it's advancing the throttle timing, and it's making the car give more fuel when I press a certain application of the accelerator pedal, so it feels peppier or snappier or quicker. But the automotive journalist knows, okay, I want a vehicle that's just simple and pure and has been engineered to be as good to drive as possible all the time. I don't want something that is better in one way or another, because usually if there are more tunes for suspension or powertrain, that means that less effort has been spent on any one individual tune. We saw that back with the E90 BMW M3, I believe it was, in that the car with the fixed suspension rode better and was better to drive than the car with the dynamic suspension, because that car had a more well dialed in suspension tuning. But for somebody just searching for a sports car, they're going to think, all right, that's one less feature that I have in the Miata, some sort of sport mode. I bet you the automatic car has a sport mode just for the transmission shift patterns. So if you've stuck with me through this, what I mean to say is anyone who gets to the point of what I would say to be an expert in a field, or a connoisseur, if you will, somebody who spends their time analyzing and critiquing a certain media or product or experience, they're going to develop tastes that are, for better or for worse, different than your standard everyday person. For example, if you ask a seasoned film critic for a movie recommendation, there's a good chance they're going to recommend some weird, esoteric, artsy sort of film that you, as somebody who's just looking for something to watch with your family on a Sunday afternoon, probably not going to like it. It's going to be strange and have aspects to it that don't translate to your average everyday viewer. Same thing if you ask a wine connoisseur or a food critic what their favorite restaurant is, they're probably going to give you something that provides these weird dishes that have special flavors and unique aspects to them that, for somebody just looking for a good pizza or a good burger, a lot of that's going to be lost on them. But to someone who spends their time day in and day out understanding what goes into fine dining, they're going to appreciate different aspects of that meal and about that dining experience. The same goes for automotive journalists. The more that we spend time in cars and try to decide what is good and what is not good about a given automobile, we develop tastes and a yearning for these vehicles that provide something different than what we typically see on the new car market. But you need to remember, as a car shopper, that those of us who have the privilege of reviewing these new cars for a living, we are not the standard shopper. My day-to-day car is a brand new vehicle every other week, sometimes multiple different vehicles regularly. And if I've got a road trip, I can request a vehicle that's more road trip friendly. If I've got a lot of city driving to do with multiple people, I'll request a hybrid or an all-electric 3-row family hauler. I mean, I don't want to go as far as to say that automotive journalists are lost from reality, but you do need to remember that we don't live, come on buddy, let's go. We don't live an average car lifestyle. And admittedly, I would probably trust an automotive journalist who has a family and therefore has to have more regular transportation around their household than some sort of single sort of automotive journalist who's pretty much relying on these cars and able to be so flexible and so detached from reality in their automotive car experience. Most automotive journalists love the Miata because they don't have to own a Miata and they don't have to sink $36,000 into a Miata. Maybe they do own a Miata, but it's an NB with 100,000 miles on it, and it's exactly the spec they wanted, and they've owned it for 6 years, and it's well more than paid off, and they only drive it for 900 miles a year because they're typically driving these vehicles. And again, I'm not exempt from this. My quote-unquote daily driver is a 1999 F350 diesel pickup truck that, again, I only have to drive a few times a week, well, really a few times a month, and it's mostly because I want to drive it, not because I have to drive it. So, the Miata is a fantastic car. The aspects that I, as an automotive journalist, are looking for when I'm evaluating a vehicle and how it drives and what it's like to be behind the wheel, the Miata is one of the best cars there is on the market. But for the average person who's buying a car to own for many years and wants it for more than just the driving experience, they need a commuter, they need a living experience, or even if they're looking for a second or third vehicle, maybe they're looking for a car with a little bit of wow factor. They're looking for something that's going to launch them 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, or they're looking for a cool factor and something that's going to impress their neighbors and impress their friends and impress their dates maybe, or something like that. The Miata doesn't do most of that. It's not a very comfortable car for day-to-day driving. It's not an impressive car to pretty much everybody on the road or in the parking lot. All it does is drive very, very well and provide a remarkably simple and satisfactory driving experience. That's all it does, and it's what it does so well. And that's what automotive journalists love about the Miata. And it's also what they get wrong about the Miata when they recommend it to the average car shopper. For me, I love the Miata. I look forward to getting into behind the wheel anytime I can. And admittedly, if I didn't have a daughter on the way, and if I didn't have the automotive press fleet to rely on, I would own a Miata. This is driving purity to me. And today when I got to go out and drive around with the top down and experience the sunshine and the direct steering and shifting feel of this car, it was driving bliss. It's as happy as I can be behind the wheel of a new vehicle. But I do have a daughter on the way, and I don't feel like spending $36,000 on this vehicle. So I don't own a Miata, even though I would like to. And that's where you need to be realistic as a car shopper is, okay, do I want one of the best sports car driving experiences on the market from a driving perspective, or are some of those other aspects of car ownership more important to me? So thank you all so much for watching. If you do want to see more on the Miata, check the link below. We've got a dedicated review on the Bose sound system, and we've covered many of the ND models in the past. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.